Staff in the Planning Division of the Department of Planning and Zoning have reviewed the application and do recommend that...
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the meeting of the Fairfax County Planning Commission, and we welcome...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and the Commission for the opportunity to speak.
Staff does also find that with the proposed development conditions, the SEA application is...
I am here to oppose the plan amendment to change the land use at the subject property.
The MCA does not object to the application provided.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, and welcome to the Planning Commission Roundtable. I'm your host, Pete Murphy, Chairman of the Fairfax County Planning Commission and the Springfield District Planning Commissioner. Tonight we're talking about Fairfax County's new Economic Success Strategic Initiative. My guests tonight are Rob Stalzer, Deputy County Executive, and Etta Davis, Economic Initiatives Coordinator with the Office of the County Executive. Rob, Etta, welcome. You know, by the way, before we begin, let me tell you, this is a historic event because I've been told by Fran, our producer, that this is our 100th Planning Commission Roundtable. So we made it. I don't know how that happened. It didn't seem possible that we would go 100 shows. I want to thank everyone that's made it possible, including our great crew that we have every time we tape this show. And some of the crew members, believe it or not, also do the Planning Commission on Wednesday and Thursday nights. Wow. So we're quite a family here.
That's great.
Well, let's talk about the Economic Success Strategic Planning Initiative. It's quite a title, so I made sure I read it correctly here. What's the purpose of the initiative, Rob?
Well, there are a number of purposes. The first is to update the 2011 plan that was actually initiated in 2009 at the start of the economic downturn that's affected the county and the region. The 2011 plan was a good effort. It identified 15 strategic goal areas that the Economic Advisory Commission identified as being important to the future economic success of Fairfax County. However, as the economy has continued to languish somewhat in Fairfax County, we're not seeing the type of job growth or certainly real property increases that we've been used to historically. Both the EAC and the Board of Supervisors wanted us to look at the adopted 2011 plan to see if in fact there were opportunities or gaps that we could pursue. The biggest area where we think the 2011 plan needs improvement is that while the strategic goal areas provided a foundation, they really didn't get into any specific actionable steps that we could take, pursue, and determine whether in fact we're achieving the type of success that we would like to achieve. So our focus has been, first of all, we revisited the 2011 strategic goal areas, the 15 goals. We've worked with the EAC as well as the Implementation Committee, which is a subcommittee of the larger EAC. The Implementation Committee, acronyms here, we call it the IC, meets on a monthly basis. We've identified 20 strategic goal areas going forward. We're in the process of cataloging all the county initiatives that are out there related to each of the 20 new goal areas, and we're identifying specific actionable steps that we can achieve over a 3 to 5 year period to actually demonstrate progress. One of the other things that we've are really focused on, and I mentioned this at the beginning of my response, is that we've got a historic high in terms of the amount of office vacancy in the county. We're now up, according to the EDA, over 19 million square feet. The federal government is doing business very differently than it has historically. They're spending less, they're employing fewer people, and that affects the economy in Fairfax County. So if we're going to position ourselves going forward so that we can be the Fairfax County that we've been historically, we feel this plan is a really important first step.
Okay, we brought up EDA is the Economic Development Authority.
Right.
ECA is EAC is the Economic Advisory Commission. We'll get into that in a minute, but what are the challenges and how often is this plan going to be updated?
Well, the county actually, the 2011 plan is the first strategic plan that the county board has actually requested be prepared for the county. And that plan was actually accepted by the board but not adopted. And that's actually a nuance. We can maybe talk about that a little later in the conversation. I think the answer going forward is we're going to have to monitor the plan on a yearly basis. We want the plan to continue to be current, to be relevant. The economy changes, the region is changing literally on a monthly basis, and so it's really important that for our future economic success, that our strategic thinking remain in concert with the community that we're trying to guide.
The Economic Advisory Commission, who are they and what did they do to contribute to this effort?
Okay, do you want to?
They're a group. They've been in existence for a while, and it was basically the group was re-energized around 2008, like Robert said. There's representatives on the EAC from universities, from Innova, from Fairfax County Public Schools, and land developers. We've got representatives from Vienna Town Council, Herndon Town Council. It's a pretty broad group, and that group meets quarterly and talks broadly about economic issues. And then there's an implementation committee, a subgroup, that meets monthly. And that group is basically a subset of the larger EAC, people who are kind of rolling up their sleeves and doing more of the writing of the plan. So it's a broad group, and it's representative of various interests in the county, and they've been helping us put this plan together.
So were they tasked, with any specific area that they were supposed to concentrate on, or were they in the developmental process of it?
The EAC in general has been tasked by the Board of Supervisors to monitor the economic activity in Fairfax County. It was actually the implementation committee working with the staff that enacted a motion 10 months ago, December 2013, that we really needed to take a deeper dive on the 2011 plan. I think that both the EAC and the implementation committee, with the support of the Board of Supervisors, has acknowledged that if we're going to move forward and have the type of economic success that we've had historically, we really needed to take a different tact on our plan. And I think it's really important to note too that the Economic Development Authority, which is a county-funded authority chartered by the Commonwealth of Virginia, historically has done a great job filling corporate office space in Fairfax County. Much of the success that we've had economically in the county and the region has come from the work of the EDA, and we acknowledge that work going forward is going to be a really important part of whatever strategic directions we take. But our perspective is that while the filling corporate office space will be important going forward, there's other aspects of the economy that we need to be focused on. One of the things, for example, are our transit-oriented development opportunities on the Silver Line and other parts of the county. Those are very important. Creating new places like Mosaic, adjacent to the Dunloring Metro station, very important. We're seeing a broader, deeper view of what economic success will entail going forward. And so the EAC, the EDA, and the implementation committee are all in unison in terms of moving forward in that direction.
With guidance from the Board of Supervisors, I would.
Yeah, the Board of Supervisors is very involved. The EAC is actually chaired by Supervisor John Faust from the Drainsville District. The Vice Chairman is Pat Harity from the Springfield District. All of our board members are a member of the EAC. And so when we meet quarterly, virtually all of the board members are there with us. I think the board, regardless of their individual agendas or what magisterial district they represent, our board members understand that the economic viability of what we want to do in the future is dependent on what we do today in terms of primarily our property tax, but also other aspects of the economy.
Certainly, a rise in the unoccupied office space in the county would be a boon to the tax base of Fairfax County and would allow the citizens to realize a lower tax rate.
That's right.
I mean, and that's a fundamental, basic thing. I mean,
Exactly.
Commercial business brings money into the county.
Yeah, and I think too, the other thing that I think everyone is concerned about is that the 19% vacancy, or the 19 million square feet, is in and of itself significant. But when you have vacant office space, that affects the overall assessed valuation of that property and the other commercial properties around it. And when you have a commercial base that's flat or falling in juxtaposition to a residential base that's increasing, that's a tough situation going forward in terms of having a tax base. And it's important to remember that our general fund, which funds most of the services in the county, including virtually all of our schools, 54% of the general fund goes to the school system. 60% of the general fund comes from the property tax revenue. So if your commercial segment of that property tax is flat or falling, then going forward, that makes it tough.
But as many people probably see as they're driving around, there's still a lot of new office space going up in certain areas, like Tyson's or Ruston. So a lot of that vacancy is from older, obsolete office space. So one of the items that we have on our list is taking a look at what can we do to help support repurposing or incentivizing the reuse of some of that office space.
Yeah. Oh, and Tyson's a national bird is the construction crane. And,
Right.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
moving right along.
Right.
What are some of the basic parts, the fundamental parts of the plan, and how were they developed, and what are the goals? I mean, you can all tie that in together.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about the 20 strategic goal areas going forward, but we actually take a more fundamental view of what we need to focus on. We're focused on people, places, employment, and governance. And I think employment has always been sort of the foundation for whatever strategic direction the county took with respect to economic development and economic success. The other three are a little bit newer. You know, we feel it's really important ultimately to be successful economically. We have to attract and retain people, whether they live here, they work here, or they just want to be here. I mean, Fairfax has to be a place where people want to be. And to do that, we got to have places where people want to live, where they want to work, and again, where they want to be, whether it's just for cultural activities or recreation or whatever. Employment, you know, we got to have jobs. That's at the end of the day, we got to have good, stable, high-paying jobs with a diversified basis. And then governance, Fairfax County needs to do everything it can to facilitate economic success, and we need to get out of the way where we're a barrier or a constraint. And so we're focused on those four areas.
And I think that's borne out from my years on the Planning Commission. I mean, now that we're at a population of 1.2 million people, when I got on the Planning Commission, if you asked someone where they were from, they said Wilkes-Barre. They stayed here because their job was related to the government or the military, or to the incumbent in the White House. And as soon as that job was over, they moved on. They went back to Wilkes-Barre. But now people are coming to Fairfax County. They're staying here. They're educating their children here. They're finding jobs here. And they are staying here. I mean, the largest demographic in growth is over 60. We used to put in a lot of daycare centers on the Planning Commission. Now we're looking at senior citizen housing, over 55, over 65 and beyond. So that demographic, I mean, the whole spectrum of the population growth is tied in to the age growth too. It's from infants now to over 65 and senior citizens. So I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time talking about that, about the boomers and how, you know, what do we need to do to keep them, and a lot of this placemaking, creating walkable neighborhoods. The boomers want that. And the same, we also spent a lot of time talking about the millennials, and they don't want to be stuck in their cars driving. They want to be able to walk and have shopping and interesting places to go. So it's interesting that the millennials and the boomers both are looking for the same thing.
You know, it's interesting too, just to take off on what Ed has said, is that if you look at the vacancy rate countywide, it's 19–20%. If you look at Reston Town Center, where we've got a livable place, where you have a mix of age groups and folks with different interests, we have virtually no vacancy. And so that tells us something, that formula, whatever it is working, and we need to try to study it, understand it, and replicate it.
Let's talk about time frames. What's the time frame of completing this plan, and what's the time frame of what it's going to cover, how many years out?
Right. Well, the time frame, according to who you ask, was have it done a month ago, because everybody is...
Well, it's Fairfax County, what do you expect, you know?
Right. Everybody is concerned about the economy, and clearly we're going into the next budget cycle, and everyone is looking at the revenues coming in and the projected expenditures. But we started our work in December 2013, as I mentioned before. Our goal is to have a draft plan to the Board of Supervisors in early 2015. So that's what we're shooting for. We just completed our community outreach last week, and we're in the process of refining our action steps. And so we're moving forward with that time frame of early 2015.
Well, there are a lot of challenges, but I guess the goal is economic success. And how do you measure that in the plan? I mean, is there guidelines as to how you do that?
There will be.
There will be.
Yeah,
that hasn't been finished
yeah,
yet.
well, that's part of, and we've gotten a lot of input from the community in terms of what's important. But some of the areas of importance that we're very focused on, and some of the 20 strategic goal areas are more developed than others. One of the areas that's very developed is the improvements to the development review process. How long does it take to get a plan through the review process and turning dirt? And so one of the metrics, for example, will be how long does it take to get a piece of property entitled through the rezoning or the land use permitting process, through the site and the building permitting process, and actually opening that business for that use. And just as an example, part of the work that we've done is we've looked at other communities. I mean, we feel that Fairfax is number one. Having said that, we know that there are communities out there, Charlotte, even Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Denver, Austin, Silicon Valley, that do things differently and better than we do. For example, you can get a restaurant, full-service restaurant, through the permitting process in Washington, D.C. in 4 to 6 weeks. Fairfax County is probably closer to 4 months. So part of our challenge is in every element of the plan, we don't want to just beat the regional competition, and Ed and I were talking about this the other week. We want to be awesome. And not in an idealistic way, but we want to be number one in every category. So from development review process, if Washington, D.C. can get you through and permit it as a full-service restaurant in 4 to 6 weeks, and we want to be 3 to 5 weeks. That's our goal, and that's the type of metric that we're going to use. And we've got other metrics that we're developing as well.
You mentioned, I know we can't cover them all because we'll go into our 101st show, but we talked about the priorities, the 15 areas that are priorities. Can you just illustrate a couple of those priorities that you're focusing on? I know we can't do all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One which has different meanings depending on who you ask is affordable housing.
Yeah.
You know, we, in our outreach, we use a technology called Think Tank, where we were able to get a lot of simultaneous, voluminous feedback from our participants in a short amount of time. And almost without fail, the priorities, the top 10 priorities came back more or less the same areas of focus no matter who we talked to. Affordable housing came back as one of our top 5 priorities in every group, and it was not in the context necessarily of the typical definition of affordable housing for folks on the lower half or lower part of the income continuum, but it will be housing that's affordable for people who are on the lower end of the income continuum, millennials, as Adam mentioned, people who want to age in place in Fairfax County, and they have retired here and they want to stay here. They don't
Go back to Wilkes-Barre.
They don't want to go back to Wilkes-Barre, or they don't want to sell their house and move to South Carolina. They want to stay here. So affordable housing is definitely one of the priority areas.
That's right. Placemaking, which we've talked about. Yep. Transportation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was a big surprise.
That's a shocker.
That is shocking. Be still my heart.
Yeah, transit. But it's more about, again, not getting in your car necessarily, but being able to use your bike and walking and healthy communities, creating an environment where people can walk to the dry cleaner and to the restaurant and not have to be stuck in traffic necessarily.
And I think it's interesting too with the bond referendum that's scheduled for tomorrow.
Right.
This is the first bond referendum for transportation that the county has had with a predominant emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle improvements, recognizing that placemaking and creating communities that have a human scale, we need to be able to get around in cars. We need to be able to get around via transit, whether it's rail or bus or what have you. But also the people part of the equation, on foot, on bikes, however, is very important. And so the $100 million referendum for tomorrow has almost 80%. If it's approved, the resources will go to those types of improvements. And we really feel going forward that's really important.
Well, before everybody rushes out tomorrow to vote on the bond referendum, we're taping this show actually before the election, so by the time this is airing, we'll know whether the bond referendum passed.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are very interested in that because it does include some of the stuff we've been talking about. How about the environment? That's always a key issue too, transportation, environment.
Right, sustainability is very important. And actually one of the things we've talked about is how other jurisdictions do a much better job of promoting their environmental sustainability initiatives. And Fairfax perhaps does more than many of these other jurisdictions, but we don't do enough to toot our own horn. And so actually one of our initiatives is just to advertise all the things that we do already in sustainability and environmental initiatives.
We've got one other, it's sort of a bureaucratic strategic goal, but it's actually structuring ourselves so that we can lead and manage going forward our economic success plan initiatives. The purpose is not to just create a plan. It's not to just have discussion. That's important because it sets a foundation for going forward, but we want to see real change. We don't want Fairfax County to be relegated to a lower tier because everyone around us is changing, but we're not. We think for us to maintain the position we've enjoyed historically, that we've got to acknowledge where we are, and then we need to intentionally move forward to get there. So that structure, that leadership, that definition of roles and responsibilities, that's really important part of moving forward and actually accomplishing our objectives.
So it's more than a plan. It's going to sit on a shelf. I mean, it's an action plan. It has action in it that's going to bring us to a better state of economic development. Is that the?
Yeah. If it was going to sit on the shelf, we wouldn't be. Yeah, we wouldn't be here. So
let me just close with one other question, which is always important. And I know you and your folks were kind enough to come brief the Planning Commission at our Saturday seminar. The outreach is very important. I mean, we're in Fairfax County and there's a task force around every corner. Right. And I know you spent a lot of time going out to the communities. You want to comment on that? Brief?
Yeah. We just finished a latest round of stakeholder sessions at the end of October. They were public meetings in the evening. We also had sessions in June. So in June, we kind of got feedback on the broad themes and goals in the plan, and in October we were asking for feedback on specific action items. We've also met with the Planning Commission and with Chambers of Commerce, with the Small Business Commission. We had a session with the Arts Council the other day. So we're basically open to meet with just about any group that invites us and that's interested in meeting with us.
anyone who will have us
Yes.
in groups of 2 or more, we'll meet with them. We also actually had a very interesting meeting in addition to the groups that Etta mentioned. The Peterson companies in the county co-hosted a group of about 24 folks involved in the land development business from the real estate finance perspective. We got a lot of insights from that group.
Yeah. And also George Mason. We've met with several folks in George Mason.
And
as
how many
well.
more outreach you're planning? I mean, you have to say,
yeah.
okay, that's enough now.
Officially, we ended our community outreach sessions last week.
Okay.
We've got some additional meetings set up in the future. For example, we feel it's very important to continue a deep dialogue with the schools. The schools play such a fundamental role in terms of initiating workforce development on the front end, and then continued through the community college and then George Mason, our other colleges and universities in the area. So we're going to meet with the school superintendent and her senior staff. So those types of conversations will be ongoing. We have a website where people can reach us and can actually provide us input. So there's ways, and hopefully through this show, we'll be able to publicize our website, and people can go on.
I
Okay,
guarantee you that. It will
excellent.
go on the screen.
Okay, good.
As you were
good.
speaking, it went on
It's
the screen.
probably
All right, good.
on there right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, we really appreciate Rob and Etta being on our 100th show. And I know
you.
one of the interesting things we did do at the Planning Commission seminar, I mentioned the fact that back several years ago, then Supervisor McConnell and then Chairman Jerry Connolly put the economic development section in the policy plan of the comprehensive plan, which is near and dear to all of us on the Planning Commission, and shows that there is a logical symbiotic relationship between economic development and the whole land use spectrum, which includes transportation and parks and the environment and telecommunications and so forth, affordable housing, with the Planning Commission, the citizens, and with the staff of the county.
Right.
Thank you so much for being on the show. If you have questions on any of our previous topics that you would like answered, mail them or email them to one of the addresses now appearing on your screen. We will answer as many as we can in upcoming programs. Until then, I'm Pete Murphy. Good night.